The Vienna Protocol, Chapter 1, An Inconvenient Partnership. Julia Thorne believed in scalpels, metaphorical ones. As one of MI6's top psychological operatives, she could dismantle a target's confidence with a well-placed question, extract information with a subtle manipulation of ego, and exit a room leaving behind nothing but a lingering sense of doubt. Her approach was clean, quiet, and brutally efficient. Marcus Vance, on the other hand, believed in hammers, the CIA's go-to man for direct action. His solution to most problems involved kicking down a door, asking questions later, loudly, and leaving a trail of minor property damage in his wake. They were, to put it mildly, incompatible. They had been forced to work together once before, in Lisbon, an operation that had succeeded despite their constant clashing, and which ended with Marcus accidentally driving their surveillance van through the wall of a historic bakery. Julia still shuddered at the memory. So when she walked into the London briefing room and saw Marcus already there, looking impossibly broad-shouldered and annoyingly handsome in a way that always set her teeth on edge, she knew this mission was going to be a nightmare. "Absolutely not," she said, stopping dead in the doorway and addressing her superior, a dry, unflappable man named Covington. "I will not work with this blunt instrument again." "Nice to see you too, Thorne," Marcus drawled from his chair, a lazy, infuriating smirk on his face. "Still holding a grudge about the pastries? They were delicious." "The mission, Agent Vance, was to be discreet," she snapped. Covington cleared his throat, cutting them off. "Enough. This is a joint operation, and your specific skill sets, however divergent, are precisely what are required." He laid out the target, Dmitry Volkov, a notorious arms dealer who was hosting an ultra-exclusive week-long party at his opulent Viennese palace to auction off a new piece of deadly satellite technology. The guest list was impenetrable. Volkov was paranoid, his security legendary. "He has one weakness," Covington continued, sliding a file across the table. "He is a hopeless romantic, a connoisseur of what he calls true love. All of his most trusted clients are powerful couples." Julia felt a cold sense of dread creeping up her spine. "And what does that have to do with us?" "Volkov has extended a last-minute invitation to a reclusive, obscenely wealthy couple known for their passionate and whirlwind romance, Mr. and Mrs. Blackwood. They are currently, and conveniently, stranded on their yacht in the Maldives with engine trouble. You two will be taking their place." Silence fell in the room. Julia stared at him, then at Marcus, whose smirk had finally vanished, replaced by a look of matching horror. "You want us to go undercover as a married couple?" Marcus asked, disbelief lacing his voice. "Not just any married couple," Covington said with a hint of relish, "as wildly, deeply, head over heels in love newlyweds. You will share a suite. You will attend romantic dinners. You will dance. You will be utterly convincing. Julia, you will handle the psychological infiltration. Marcus, if things go sideways, you will provide the exit strategy." It was a perfectly logical, completely insane plan. 2 days later, Julia found herself standing in the gilded, chandelier-lit foyer of a palatial suite at a Viennese hotel. Her fake 2-carat diamond wedding ring felt heavy and foreign on her finger. Marcus was directing the bellhops, his tone already more suited to a military operation than a romantic getaway. When they were finally alone, the heavy door clicking shut behind them, they stood on opposite sides of the massive living room, the silence crackling with unspoken hostility. The suite was a caricature of romance, with roses on every surface and a bottle of champagne chilling in a silver bucket. They stared at the cake, then at each other. Their first test as a loving couple had arrived. "I suppose," Julia said with a sigh of pure resignation, "we should share the damn cake." Marcus picked up a fork. Only if you promise not to tell me what my choice of dessert says about my unresolved childhood issues." Their mission had begun, and it was already shaping up to be the longest week of their lives.
Chapter 2: The Art of the Performance. Their first public appearance as the loving Blackwoods was a dinner party hosted by Volkov in a hall that looked like it had been stolen from Versailles. Julia, draped in a sapphire blue gown that Covington's team had provided, looked every bit the part of a wealthy heiress. Marcus, in a perfectly tailored tuxedo, looked less like a besotted husband and more like a panther forced to attend a tea party. "Smile," Julia murmured to him through her own dazzling, practiced smile as they entered. "You look like you're about to storm the place." "I'm considering it," he muttered back, his hand resting stiffly on the small of her back. "This would be a lot easier with a flashbang." "Try using charm instead. It's the explosive device of the civilized world." Their target, Dmitry Volkov, was a man who oozed a dangerous reptilian charm. He greeted them warmly, his eyes lingering on Julia with an appraiser's gaze. "Mr. and Mrs. Blackwood, it is an honor. I have heard so much about your legendary romance." "The honor is all ours, Dmitry," Julia said, her voice warm and melodious. She instinctively leaned her head on Marcus's shoulder, a gesture of wifely affection. Marcus flinched almost imperceptibly before recovering and tightening his grip on her back. "My husband was just saying how much he was looking forward to this." "Indeed," Marcus managed, his voice a low growl that he was probably trying to pass off as romantic fervor. The evening was a minefield of feigned intimacy. They had to hold hands across the dinner table. They had to laugh at Volkov's terrible jokes. At one point, Volkov's wife, a sharp-eyed woman named Anya, asked them to tell the story of how they met. Julia, the master storyteller, launched into a beautifully fabricated tale of a chance encounter in a rain-soaked Parisian bookstore. It was a story filled with poetic details and romantic coincidences. Marcus, forced to play along, looked on with a mixture of grudging admiration and utter panic. "And when I saw her," Julia concluded, gazing up to Marcus with what she hoped was a look of pure adoration, "I knew. I just knew." "And what did you think, Mr. Blackwood?" Anya asked, her eyes boring into Marcus. Marcus froze. This wasn't in the script. He looked at Julia, then at the expectant faces around the table. He cleared his throat. "I thought," he began, his mind blank. He looked at Julia again, at the way the chandelier light caught the blue of her dress. "I thought she was going to be a lot of trouble." Anya's eyes widened slightly, but then Volkov let out a booming laugh. "Ah, honesty, the bedrock of a passionate marriage. I love it." Julia kicked Marcus sharply under the table, but she had to admit it had been a surprisingly effective, if terrifyingly authentic answer. The true test came after dinner, when Volkov announced there would be dancing. A string quartet began to play a slow, sweeping waltz. "I believe this is our cue," Marcus whispered to Julia, his voice laced with dread. "Just follow my lead, and for God's sake, don't step on my feet." He led her to the floor. Unlike the chaotic dance in Lisbon, this was different. He was a surprisingly good dancer, his movements strong and confident. He held her firmly, professionally, but it was impossible to ignore their proximity. She could feel the warmth of his hand on her back, the solid strength of his chest. The scent of his cologne was clean and masculine, a stark contrast to the cloying perfume of the other guests. As they moved together, their steps falling into a practiced rhythm, the rest of the room began to fade away. The mission, Volkov, the schematics, it all became a distant hum. There was only the music and the man holding her. She found herself looking at the strong line of his jaw, the surprising intensity in his dark eyes as he focused on their steps. For a split second, she forgot she was playing a part. She felt a flicker of something real, something dangerously unprofessional. "You're staring," he muttered, his voice low. "I'm playing my part," she retorted coolly. "A loving wife is supposed to look at her husband with adoration." "Right," he said, but a strange expression crossed his face. "Well, you're very convincing." As the waltz came to an end, he spun her out in a final dramatic flourish. For a moment, they stood poised, his arms securely around her waist, the eyes of everyone in the room on them. They were the perfect picture of a couple in love. The performance was flawless. And as they stood there, flushed from the dance, Julia was hit by a terrifying thought. The most dangerous part of this mission wasn't the arms dealer or the risk of exposure. It was the terrifying, undeniable fact that Marcus Vance was an exceptionally good partner, both on the dance floor, and she was beginning to fear in every other way as well.
Chapter 3. The Lock and the Key. Their flawless performance at the dinner party earned them exactly what they needed: Volkov's trust. The next day, he invited Marcus to a gentleman's afternoon of clay pigeon shooting and high-stakes poker, a prime opportunity for Marcus to get close to Volkov's inner circle. Julia, meanwhile, was invited to a private art viewing and spa day with Anya and the other wives. It was the perfect division of labor. He would handle the brawn, she the brains. "Remember the objective," Julia reminded him as they stood in their suite, dressing for their separate missions. "Get a sense of the security layout for his private study. We need to know the patterns of the guards, the type of locks. Don't just punch the first person who looks at you sideways." "And you," Marcus countered, adjusting his tie with a grimace, "try not to psychoanalyze Volkov's wife into a full-blown existential crisis before afternoon tea. We need her compliant, not catatonic." Despite their barbed words, a new, unspoken understanding had settled between them. The previous night's waltz had shifted something. The hostility was still there, but it was now laced with a grudging respect. Julia's afternoon was a masterclass in subtle interrogation. While pretending to admire Volkov's collection of stolen masterpieces, she skillfully guided the conversation with Anya from art to architecture and finally to the palace's recent renovations, learning about the new state-of-the-art security system that protected Volkov's most precious assets. She learned that his study was secured by a unique biometric lock keyed to his thumbprint and a verbal passphrase that changed daily. Access would be impossible without him. Marcus, meanwhile, exceeded her expectations. He didn't just observe the security, he used his hammer reputation to his advantage. He accidentally got lost on the way to the shooting range, using his affable, slightly oafish American persona to blunder his way through corridors he had no business being in. He charmed a junior guard into complaining about the patrol schedules and lost a high-stakes poker hand to Volkov's head of security, earning the man's drunken gratitude and a wealth of information about the study's alarm system. That night, they met back in their suite, the pretense of their cover falling away the moment the door was locked. They spread a floor plan of the palace on the grand Persian rug and began to piece together their findings. "The study is on the 3rd floor, east wing," Marcus reported, pointing to a location on the map. "Guards patrol every 15 minutes. But there's a 5-minute window at 2 a.m. during the shift change. Anya told me the lock is biometric, thumbprint and a daily passphrase. We can't get in without Volkov himself." They stared at the map, the problem laid out before them. They had a window of opportunity, but no way to open the door. "So we need to get Volkov to his study at 2 a.m., Marcus said, stating the obvious. "And we need him to do it willingly." "He won't," Julia said immediately. "He's paranoid. He never goes to his study after midnight." "Then we need to give him a reason," Marcus insisted. "A reason so compelling he breaks his own rules." He began to pace the room, the restless energy of a caged predator radiating from him. A threat, a security breach. Too risky. It would put the entire palace on high alert. What about a medical emergency? Too unpredictable. We can't guarantee he'd go to his study for a defibrillator. They argued for nearly an hour, their different methodologies clashing. His ideas were too blunt, hers too subtle.
The frustration mounted, the tension in the room thick enough to cut with one of Volkov's stolen ornamental swords. "Damn it, Julia, just for once can you think like a hammer instead of a scalpel?" He finally exploded, running a hand through his hair in exasperation. "Not every problem can be solved with a clever word. And you, try not to psychoanalyze Volkov's wife into a full-blown existential crisis before afternoon tea. We need her compliant, not catatonic." They stood facing each other, chests heaving, the argument hanging in the air. In the heat of the moment, they were no longer Mr. and Mrs. Blackwood. They were just Julia and Marcus, two clashing, frustrated, and dangerously compatible agents. And then, in the middle of their fight, the solution struck Julia with the force of a physical blow. "Oh my God," she whispered, her eyes widening. "What?" "A key," she repeated, looking at him with a new dawning excitement. "You're right, we need a key, but not for the door." She pointed to the floor plan, then looked at him. "Anya Volkov. She's terrified of her husband, but she's also deeply unhappy. She thinks he's having an affair. I saw it in her eyes today." Marcus's expression shifted from anger to confusion. "What does that have to do with anything?" "We don't need to create a threat to his security. We need to create a threat to his marriage. We're going to give Anya a reason to believe there's proof of his infidelity hidden in his study, and we're going to convince her to help us get it." Marcus stared at him, his mind slowly catching up. He saw the genius of it, the elegance, the sheer, beautiful audacity. It was a scalpel and a hammer working together. "You," he said, a slow, admiring grin breaking across his own face, "are terrifying." "I know," she replied, her smile matching his. "Now let's go break a heart."
Chapter 4. The Midnight Confession. The plan was a high-wire act of emotional manipulation, and Julia was the lead performer. The next day, during a lavish garden party, she found Anya Volkov sitting alone by a fountain, the picture of melancholic elegance. Julia approached, her expression a perfect mask of gentle concern. "Anya, my dear, is everything all right?" she began, sitting beside her. "You seem troubled." It was a simple opening, but it was all that was needed. Anya, starved for a confidant in her gilded cage, crumbled. With a little more prompting from Julia, subtle questions, sympathetic nods, and a shared invented story of a past betrayal in her perfect marriage to Marcus, Anya confessed her fears. She was sure Dmitri was seeing someone else. She spoke of his late-night calls, his unexplained absences. "I just wish I knew for sure," Anya whispered, tears shimmering in her eyes. "But not knowing is what's killing me." This was Julia's moment. She took Anya's hand, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "My darling, what if you could know? What if there was proof?" She then spun a masterful lie. She told Anya that her husband, Marcus, had overheard two of Volkov's guards talking. They spoke of a safe in the study where Volkov kept not just business papers, but personal, sensitive items. She hinted that Marcus had seen Dmitri place a small velvet jewelry box inside just yesterday. "A gift, perhaps," Julia suggested, planting the seed, "for someone else." The effect was instantaneous. Anya's sorrow hardened into a cold, diamond-hard fury. "I want to see it. I want to see what's in that box." "But Dmitri's study, it's impossible to get into," Julia said, feigning helplessness. "Not for me," Anya said, a dangerous glint in her eyes. "I am his wife. My thumbprint is also keyed to the lock, a security measure in case something happens to him." Julia had to use all her training to keep the look of triumph off her face. This was a detail none of their intelligence had uncovered. It was perfect. That night, they put the second half of the plan into motion. While Julia stayed with Anya, bolstering her courage, Marcus executed his part. He used a micro-transmitter to create a ghost signal on the palace's internal security network, a signal that mimicked an unauthorized entry into the East Wing corridors, but not into the study itself. It was enough to draw the attention of the on-duty guards, pulling them away from their usual patrol route for a few crucial minutes to investigate the anomaly. At precisely 2 a.m., during the shift change,
Julia and a trembling but resolute Anya made their way to the study. The corridor was empty, just as Marcus had planned. They stood before the heavy oak door. Anya pressed her thumb to the biometric scanner. It glowed green. "The passphrase," Julia whispered. "What is it today?" Anya took a deep breath. "It is always the name of something he desires most. Today, it is sovereignty." She spoke the word into the discreet microphone. There was a soft, satisfying click as the heavy lock disengaged. They slipped inside. The study was a monument to power and paranoia, dark wood, leather-bound books, and no windows. While Anya made a beeline for the large, imposing safe behind the desk, Julia went to work. Her target was Volkov's computer. She inserted a small, specially designed USB drive. It wasn't a simple download device. It was a cloner. In under 60 seconds, it would create a perfect, encrypted mirror of the entire hard drive, schematics included. Anya, meanwhile, was fumbling with the safe's combination. I can't remember it," she stammered, her panic rising. Julia glanced at the progress bar on her cloning software. 40 seconds left. "Breathe, Anya," she said calmly. "Think what is always on his mind. Power, money, control," Anya whispered as her fingers shook as he turned the dial. 20 seconds. The download is almost complete. Suddenly, they heard a noise from the corridor, a man's voice, sharp and questioning. One of the guards had returned early. Anya let out a small gasp of fear. The safe remained locked. Julia's progress bar hit 100%. She deftly removed the USB drive and slipped it into a hidden pocket in her evening gown. Objective complete. "We have to go," Julia said, grabbing Anya's arm. They were halfway to the door when it swung open. It wasn't a guard. It was Marcus. His face was grim. "Volkov knows," he said in a low, urgent voice. "Someone tipped him off. He's on his way up. We have about 30 seconds. Panic flared in Anya's eyes. She was trapped. Julia's mind raced. Their exit was cut off. Volkov would find them here, his wife and the loving Mrs. Blackwood, in his private study in the middle of the night. The entire operation, their lives, were about to implode. Marcus looked from Julia's determined face to Anya's terrified one. He scanned the room, his tactical mind assessing every angle. There was no way out through the door. Then his eyes landed on the large, ornate tapestry hanging on the wall behind Volkov's desk, depicting some bloody historical battle. "There's always another way out," he muttered. He strode to the tapestry, pulled at its edge, and revealed what lay behind it. Not a wall, but the dark, narrow opening of an old, forgotten dumbwaiter shaft. "You have got to be kidding me," Julia breathed. "No time to argue," Marcus said, peering down into the darkness. "Ladies first." Their carefully constructed plan had just been blown to pieces. Now all that was left was a hammer solution, a desperate, improbable escape.
Chapter 5. The Unscheduled Departure. "Into the servants' elevator," Anya Volkov whispered, her voice trembling on the edge of hysteria. "Are you insane?" "Slightly," Marcus replied, already wrenching the old dumbwaiter doors fully open. "But we're alive. It's a trade-off I'm willing to make. Go." He practically bundled the terrified woman into the dusty, cramped space. Julia, clutching the precious USB drive, followed without hesitation. Before Marcus could climb in after them, the main door to the study burst open. Dmitry Volkov stood there, his face a thunderous mask of fury, flanked by 2 armed guards. "Blackwood," he roared. Marcus gave him a lazy, 2-fingered salute. "Volkov, love what you've done with the place." Then he slammed the dumbwaiter doors shut and hit the down button. The small box lurched and began its slow, creaking descent into darkness. Above them, they could hear muffled shouting and the sound of heavy blows against the door. "He's going to kill me," Anya sobbed from the corner. "He has to catch you first," Julia said, her voice calm despite her own pounding heart. The dumbwaiter shuddered to a halt in what felt like a basement kitchen, dark and smelling of stale grease.
Marcus forced the doors open, and they scrambled out. "This way," he commanded, leading them through a maze of service corridors he must have mapped during his earlier blundering. They emerged into a small gated courtyard at the back of the palace. Their escape vehicle, a nondescript black sedan Julia had arranged, was parked in the alley beyond. They were almost home free. But as Marcus worked the lock on the gate, a spotlight flooded the courtyard. Volkov and his men were on a balcony above them. "Nowhere to run, my dear friends," Volkov called down, a chilling smile on his face. "I hate it when they say that," Marcus muttered, finally getting the gate open. "It's so cliché." They spilled out into the alley, but their car was blocked by another vehicle. Volkov's men were closing in from both ends. They were trapped. "I told you your plan was too subtle," Marcus said to Julia, a strange, almost exhilarated grin on his face as he backed her against the alley wall. "And I told you not to blow anything up," she shot back, her mind racing for an escape route. "Plans change," he said, his eyes glinting in the dim light. And then he did something that wasn't in any mission protocol. He cupped her face in his hands and kissed her. It was not a gentle, romantic kiss. It was a kiss born of adrenaline and desperation, a raw, explosive collision of two opposing forces that had finally found their center. It was chaos and control, scalpel and hammer. It was everything they had been pretending not to feel for the past week, unleashed in one breathtaking moment. Her hands came up to grip his jacket, pulling him closer, all thoughts of escape momentarily obliterated. The kiss lasted only a few seconds, but it changed everything. When he pulled away, they were both breathless. "What?" she managed to say. "Was that for?" He said, "A distraction," though his eyes told a different story. He nodded over her shoulder, while everyone's attention, Volkov's, his guards, and even her own had been on their dramatic embrace. A second, identical black sedan had pulled up silently at the far end of the alley. The driver, an MI6 agent, gave a subtle flash of his headlights. Their real escape vehicle. "Let's go," Marcus said, grabbing her hand. He shoved a small, heavy object into Anya Volkov's hands. "A present for your husband. Pull the pin and throw it." It was a concussion grenade. As Anya, fueled by a potent cocktail of fear and rage, hurled the grenade toward her husband's men, Marcus and Julia sprinted for the waiting car. They dove into the back seat as the grenade went off with a deafening bang and a blinding flash of light, creating the perfect chaos for their departure. The car sped away into the Viennese night, leaving behind a stunned arms dealer, a liberated wife, and a very confused security team. They sat in the back of the speeding car, the city lights a blur outside the window. Julia's heart was still hammering, but not just from the escape. The USB drive felt heavy in her pocket, a symbol of their mission's success. But the memory of his kiss was heavier, a silent, undeniable truth between them. She looked at him. The adrenaline was fading from his face, replaced by a cautious, questioning look. "So," she said, her voice carefully neutral, despite the turmoil inside her. "A distraction, was it?" He turned to face her, his expression serious. "The car was the distraction. The kiss, that was just long overdue." Julia felt a slow smile spread across her face. "You, Marcus Vance, are an absolute menace." "I know," he said, his own smile finally breaking through. "But you have to admit, together, we make a damn good team." She couldn't argue with that. She looked out at the lights of Vienna, a city of waltzes and intrigue. Their mission was over, but she had a strong feeling their partnership
was just beginning.